Okay, Phil Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. It's now the 24th of October, 2020, and today's topic is the truth about reparations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a slide. I want to show you the picture, and I also want my video talking head to be sharing the screen. So just give me a moment to do all that, and let's get started. Okay. During the first 25 years after the Civil War, about half of the federal budget was spent on items that did not benefit former Confederates, not even a penny. So my point is that even though the discussion today is dominated by reparations for slavery and has been for several years now, what I can demonstrate here in dollars and cents is that former Confederates have already paid reparations. Just because they were readmitted to the Union does not mean they didn't have to pay an equivalent penalty. Now, the reparations are not for slavery per se, they are essentially reparations for losing the war. So here's the way it can be summarized. In the first 25 years after the war, 52% of the federal budget went for three items, not one penny of which benefited former Confederates. The largest was $2.3 billion on the interest on the federal war debt. During the Civil War, the debt from the national government for the United States went from $60 million to $2.7 billion. It was a 40-fold increase. That debt was essentially in the form of bonds issued by the United States to Northerners, primarily Northern families, but also Northern banks. The second largest item in the first 25 years after the Civil War was the budget surpluses, and these surpluses were used to retire the federal debt, and back in those days they actually did that. And then the third item was about $1.2 billion in the first 25 years to pay Union veterans pensions. Confederate veterans did not get pensions, so this was again another item that did not benefit any former Confederate, not even a penny of it. And for the first 25 years after the war, they totaled over half of the federal budget. So the other 48% of the federal budget, Southerners got presumably their share of it, but we won't even get into an analysis of that because that's debatable as well. There's a fourth factor that needs to be taken into consideration, and that is that the interest on the federal debt was paid in gold. And the first thing that President Grant did after he took office in March of 1869, the first bill he signed was the Public Credit Act, which also required that all of the bonds, the $2.7 billion in war bonds that were issued during the war and held by Northerners, none by former Confederates, they had to be repaid in gold as well. Now, the reason this is significant is because the bonds were purchased with paper money that traded at a fluctuating discount to gold. The first federal paper money was issued in February of 1862, less than a year after the war started, but it continued to issue them in ever larger quantities until the end of the war. And the discount fluctuated. So it probably averaged 30 or 40%, but I'm going to show you in another chart how it fluctuated during the war. The bottom line is that when the bonds were repaid in gold and the interest was paid in gold, it was a bonus to the bondholder, a windfall bonus to the bondholder, but an added cost to the taxpayer, and the taxpayers that didn't own any such bonds were the Confederates. Now, some Northerners didn't own any either, but certainly none of the former Confederates did. Now, yeah, it's being shared. Let me enlarge it. Okay, this is the gold price fluctuation. It is essentially, I want to enlarge my picture again so you can see that better. This is the inverse, the reciprocal of what the discount would be. In other words, when the paper dollar was worth 35 cents of the gold dollar, the reciprocal of that was that the gold dollars was worth $2.80 for each paper dollar. And that's right here. As you can see, that is late June, early July, 1864. So if you look at these 4 years of the war, essentially right in here, that gives you the discount. But as you can see, it fluctuated. My guess is it looks like it averaged probably more than 40%, probably around 50%. I'm making that line draw right there, which means if the average investor purchased the bonds at a 50% discount, which looks like it is about the average here, that when the bond was redeemed, they doubled the money. And that doesn't count the interest payments, which were also in gold. Extra cost to the taxpayer, extra windfall benefit to the bondholder, none of whom were former Confederates. So let me stop right here. Union veterans pensions, let me enlarge that. And then also my video over here. I wonder if I can make that any larger. No, I think that's it. Okay, so what this shows is that really in the first 25 years after the Civil War, Union veterans pensions were going along here. So the first 25 years ended in 1890. So that was about $800 million a year. But as you can see, it goes up to and actually peaked annually. The annual payment peaked at about $1.8 billion in 1921. And the total of Union veterans pensions was about 8 billion, 8 billion. 8 billion compared to 2.7 billion in all the war debt. So you can see the Union veterans pension was a major windfall benefit for the Union soldiers and their descendants. And in point of fact, the last Union veteran pension monthly payment was made to a descendant, I think it was a granddaughter, in May of 2020, 5 months ago. But again, they peaked at about $1.1 billion annually in 1921. Another important point to keep in mind about this Union veterans pension, it was essentially a bribe to the Union veterans to keep them loyal to the Republican Party, because many of them were from the Midwestern states that might otherwise have preferred to have low tariffs. But the Republican Party told them, look, if you make us cut the tariff, we can't pay your pension. So that was kind of the way the Democrats bribe people now with, we're going to give you, we're going to pay off all your student loan debts and all the other crap that we're hearing from them. But nonetheless, that was used by the Republicans in the 19th century to keep the former Union soldiers, the Union veterans, loyal to the Republican Party. Now, during the 19th century, after the Civil War, there was only one Democrat elected president, and that was Grover Cleveland. But he could not serve 2 consecutive terms because he lost the election for his second consecutive term to Benjamin Harrison in 2 states that did it, New York and Indiana. He lost by 4,000 or 5,000 votes typically in each state, something of that magnitude. But New York had 45,000 Union veterans collecting pensions, and Indiana had 25,000. So you can see that a significant number, a significant multiple of the winning votes in Indiana and New York came from Union veterans pensions. Union veterans who were paid pensions to essentially vote Republican. So what I'm showing here in dollars and cents is that, again, to repeat, even though the topic today is reparations for slavery, these charts, these facts demonstrated that the former Confederates have already paid reparations. If not for slavery, then they certainly paid reparations or an equivalent penalty for reparations simply for losing the war. And nobody's talking about it. So these facts should be talked about because, if Southerners have already paid this, they shouldn't be held responsible for paying twice. Lastly, what I want to do is point out my book. This is my latest book, Causes of the Civil War. was just published last month, September of 2020. This was triggered by the attacks, the mob destruction of Confederate monuments. I wanted to give readers a chance to get the explanations, the facts, and the arguments that they can use to help keep Confederate memorials and statues in place should they, make a presentation before the commissioners of some government body that's going to be deciding about removing Confederate memorials. This book is available at Amazon for $22. If you want to get a signed copy, you can get that from me for $25. I will pay the postage, delivery, and shipping if it's here in the United States. To get a signed copy, just email me, Phil_Leigh, L-E-I-G-H, at me.com. Okay, that's our show, and thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.